Montana Territory, 1872. The scent of pine hung thick in the mountain air as the last copper light of sunset painted the western sky. In the valley below, nestled among aspen trees just beginning to turn gold with autumn, the small but growing town of Silver Creek carried on with evening business. Lanterns flickered to life one by one, creating a constellation of human determination against the encroaching darkness. This far west, darkness meant vulnerability, darkness meant danger. Lillian Wells believed this truth more deeply than most. At 22 years old, she had already learned that survival in this untamed territory required vigilance, self-reliance, and above all, emotional distance. Her father's trading post stood at the edge of town, a sturdy log structure that had weathered 5 harsh Montana winters and served as both home and livelihood. As she swept the wooden porch, her honey-blonde hair pulled back in a practical braid, she watched the approaching rider with the same detached wariness she offered all strangers. "Seems we've got a visitor," her father called from inside where he tallied the day's accounts. "Best put on your pleasant face, Lily." She sighed softly, smoothing her simple blue calico dress. "Every stranger is just trouble waiting to happen, Pa, you know that as well as I do." "And every customer is money in our pockets," he countered good-naturedly, "which we need if we aim to expand come spring." Lillian nodded reluctantly, watching the lone rider approach. She had built her life around a simple truth: attachment was dangerous in a land where death came easily and often. Men particularly represented risk. They rode in with promises, then rode out just as quickly, leaving only heartbreak behind. She had witnessed it repeatedly in the 5 years since they'd settled here after her mother's death. The frontier was no place for love, only survival, and she had become quite skilled at survival. The rider drew closer, and despite herself, Lillian noticed he sat his horse with an easy grace that spoke of many hours in the saddle. His black Stetson was pulled low against the setting sun, and as he dismounted in front of the trading post, she caught sight of his face, younger than she expected, perhaps 25, with clear blue eyes that crinkled slightly at the corners when he nodded a greeting. No weathered lines carved his features, just a light dusting of stubble across a strong jaw. His clothes, while trail-worn, were neat, a far cry from the unwashed drifters who occasionally passed through. "Evening, miss," he said, removing his hat in a gesture of politeness rare in these parts. "Isaac Everett. I was hoping to purchase supplies before continuing north." "The trading post closes at sundown," she replied evenly, though the sun still lingered above the distant peaks. "But I suppose we can accommodate you if you're quick about it." If her coolness surprised him, he didn't show it. Instead, a warm smile spread across his face, revealing straight white teeth. "Much appreciated. Been writing since dawn, and my provisions are running low." Her father emerged onto the porch, wiping his hands on his apron. "Welcome to Wells Trading Post, young man. Don't mind my daughter, hospitality isn't her strong suit." "Pa," she protested quietly, "just speaking truth, Lily." He extended his hand to the stranger, Thomas Wells. "Come inside and tell me what you need." As the men disappeared into the store, Lillian remained on the porch, breathing in the cooling evening air. Something about the stranger unsettled her, not in the way that made her reach for the shotgun kept beneath the counter, but in a way that made her uncomfortably aware of herself. She pushed the feeling aside. People passed through Silver Creek all the time, this one would be no different. Inside, she listened as Isaac Everett explained his situation to her father. He had taken a job as foreman at the Carson Ranch 20 miles north, having spent the last few years working cattle in Wyoming. His easy, articulate manner suggested education beyond what most cowboys possessed. "Planning to winter there?" her father asked as he assembled the requested supplies. "Yes, sir. Mr. Carson has a growing herd and needs someone who can manage the hands and the stock through the cold months. Smart man getting settled before the first snow. It comes early up here and it comes hard." Isaac nodded. "So I've heard. This will be my first Montana winter." Thomas Wells chuckled. "Well, you'll earn every cent of your wages, that's certain." As her father continued the friendly interrogation that he subjected all newcomers to, Lillian moved efficiently around the store, gathering the items on Isaac's list. Coffee, flour, sugar, ammunition for his Winchester, tobacco, and a few modest personal items, nothing excessive or suspicious. "My daughter knows this inventory better than I do," her father explained proudly. Been running the book since she was 17. Isaac turned to her, genuine interest in his expression. That's impressive. Most men I know can barely keep track of their own belongings, let alone a whole trading post. Necessity teaches quickly, she replied, avoiding his gaze as she calculated his bill. That will be $4.65. He paid without haggling, another rarity, and as she wrapped his purchases in brown paper, he asked, "Does Silver Creek have a decent restaurant? Or should I make do with my own cooking tonight?" Before she could deliver the dismissive response on the tip of her tongue, her father interjected. "Mrs. Halloran runs a boarding house that serves the best meals in town. Just down the main street, white house with blue shutters. Tell her Tom Wells sent you." Isaac thanked them both, loaded his supplies into his saddlebags, and with a tip of his hat, rode toward town. Lillian watched him go, telling herself the sudden emptiness she felt was merely hunger. "Seems like a decent sort," her father remarked as they closed up the shop for the night. "We've thought that before," she reminded him. Her father sighed, his weathered hand resting briefly on her shoulder. "Not everyone is like James Colton, Lily. You can't judge every man by the actions of one." She stiffened at the name. "I don't. I judge them by the dozen others who have proven just as untrustworthy. Someday, daughter, you'll have to open your heart again. This is no life, closing yourself off from any chance of happiness." "I have everything I need right here," she answered with finality, securing the heavy wooden bar across the shop door. "The trading post, you are plans for expansion. I don't need complications." Her father shook his head sadly but said no more. They both knew the conversation would only travel in circles as it had many times before. Later that night, as Lillian prepared for bed in her small room above the trading post, she found herself wondering about Isaac Everett. There had been something in his eyes, a steadiness, a clarity, that differentiated him from the rough men who typically passed through Silver Creek. But she had learned long ago that appearances were deceptive, especially in men looking to impress. The frontier was littered with broken promises and abandoned women. She would not be among them. Sleep came fitfully, haunted by memories of James Colton and his silver tongue, of her mother's slow death from mountain fever, of all the hard lessons the Montana Territory had taught her about loss and survival. By morning, she had reinforced her resolve. Isaac Everett was simply another drifter, temporarily anchored at the Carson Ranch. Silver Creek had seen his kind before and would see many more. He merited no special consideration. But the frontier had other plans. 2 days later, as Lillian drove their wagon back from Helena with a load of supplies for the store, a sudden autumn storm rolled over the mountains. Dark clouds swallowed the afternoon sun, and within minutes rain lashed down with surprising ferocity. The usually docile creek that gave the town its name swelled rapidly, and by the time Lillian reached the low crossing 5 miles from home, the water ran swift and high. She halted the team, assessing the danger. To wait meant spending the night exposed to the elements. To proceed risked washing away in the current. As she deliberated, hoofbeats approached from behind, and she turned to find Isaac Everett riding toward her, similarly drenched. "Miss Wells," he called over the downpour, "this crossing isn't safe, the water's too high." "I'm aware," she replied, struggling to keep irritation from her voice. "I've lived here 5 years." If her sharpness wounded him, he showed no sign. "There's another crossing 2 miles upstream, shallower with better footing. I just came from there." Lightning split the sky, followed immediately by a crack of thunder that spooked her horses. As she fought to steady them, Isaac dismounted and moved to help, his hands sure on the harness as he spoke calming words to the frightened animals. "Thank you," she said stiffly when the team settled. "You know this country better than I do," he acknowledged, rain dripping from the brim of his hat. "But if you're willing to trust me, I can guide you to that crossing." Pride warred with practicality in Lillian's mind. Finally, practicality won. "Lead the way, Mr. Everett." He nodded, remounting his horse. "Stay close, the trail narrows through the trees." For the next half hour, they navigated the slick forest path, Isaac occasionally glancing back to ensure she followed safely. The rain continued unabated, but the dense pines provided some shelter. When they reached the alternative crossing, Lillian saw he had been right. Though swollen, the creek here spread wider and shallower over a rocky bed. Isaac rode ahead, testing the depth, then returned to guide her wagon through. Water rushed around the wheels but never reached the axles. Once on the other side, they continued toward Silver Creek, emerging from the forest to find the storm beginning to clear. "Should be smooth traveling from here," Isaac said as they rejoined the main road, "though you'll still be soaked through by the time you reach home." Despite herself, Lillian laughed, a short, surprising sound. "I believe that ship has sailed, Mr. Everett." His answering smile revealed that same genuine warmth she'd noticed during their first meeting. "I suppose it has." They traveled the remaining miles in surprisingly companionable silence. As the trading post came into view, Lillian felt an unexpected obligation to express genuine gratitude. "You didn't have to help me back there," she said. "Thank you." "No thanks needed, Miss Wells. Out here we look out for each other, don't we? That's how survival works." She glanced at him sharply, wondering if he somehow knew her philosophy, but his expression remained open and unassuming. "Yes," she agreed cautiously. "That's how survival works." Her father rushed out as they approached, relief evident on his face. "Lillian, I was about to come searching. This storm came from nowhere. Mr. Everett showed me a safer crossing," she explained as she brought the wagon to a halt. Thomas Wells extended his hand to the young cowboy. "Then I owe you my thanks, son. My daughter is the most precious thing I have." "Pa," Lillian protested, embarrassed. Isaac shook her father's hand firmly. "No debt owed, sir. Anyone would have done the same." But they both knew that wasn't true. Many men would have ridden past, concerned only with their own comfort and safety. Thomas Wells clearly recognized this, for he insisted, "At least stay for dinner, it's the least we can offer." Before Lillian could object, Isaac smiled regretfully. "I appreciate the invitation, but I need to get back to the ranch. Mr. Carson will be expecting me with these medicines for his wife." He patted his saddlebag. "Perhaps another time." As he prepared to depart, he turned to Lillian. "The Carson Ranch is having a harvest gathering next Saturday. Nothing fancy, just food, music, maybe some dancing. You and your father would be welcome guests." Her instinct was to decline immediately, but her father spoke first. "That sounds delightful. We haven't attended a proper social gathering in months." "Excellent," Isaac said, his gaze returning to Lillian. "Until Saturday, then." As he rode away, Lillian turned to her father with exasperation. "Why did you accept?" "We have inventory to complete." "Inventory can wait," he replied firmly. "You've buried yourself in work and worry for too long, Lily. It's time you remembered there's more to life." "I remember perfectly well what else life holds," she said quietly, memories of past pain surfacing. "Disappointment, betrayal." Her father's expression softened. "And joy, connection, the very things your mother would have wanted for you." Mention of her mother always disarmed Lillian's arguments. She sighed, conceding this battle while silently promising herself that attending the gathering didn't mean lowering her guard. She would go, satisfy her father's wishes, and maintain the emotional distance that had protected her thus far. But as the week progressed, she found her thoughts returning repeatedly to Isaac Everett, to his calm competence during the storm, to the respect with which he addressed both her and her father, to the lack of presumption in his manner. She told herself she was merely cataloging observations, as she would with any regular customer. The fluttering sensation that accompanied these thoughts was merely indigestion, nothing more. Saturday arrived clear and cool, a perfect autumn day. The leaves had transformed fully to golden crimson, and the mountain air carried the scent of ripened apples and wood smoke. Lillian, dressed with care in her best dress, forest green wool with delicate embroidery at the collar and cuffs, a gift from her father on her last birthday. She arranged her blonde hair in a more elaborate style than her usual practical braid, securing it with tortoiseshell combs that had belonged to her mother. "You look beautiful," her father said when she descended the stairs. "Every bit your mother's daughter." The Carson Ranch sprawled across a picturesque valley, its main house and outbuildings nestled against a backdrop of pine-covered hills. By the time Lillian and her father arrived, the celebration was well underway. Lanterns hung from posts around a cleared area that served as a dance floor, and tables laden with food lined one side of the yard. A trio of musicians played lively tunes, and perhaps 30 people, ranch hands, neighboring settlers, and townspeople, mingled in the warm afternoon sun. Mrs. Carson, a plump, cheerful woman in her 50s, greeted them enthusiastically. "Thomas Wells, and this must be the daughter you're always bragging about. Welcome, my dear. Help yourself to food and don't let these cowboys intimidate you. Most of them clean up reasonably well." Lillian smiled politely, scanning the crowd. She told herself she wasn't looking for anyone in particular, but her heart quickened when she spotted Isaac across the gathering. He was engaged in conversation with an older man she recognized as Amos Carson, but as if sensing her presence, he glanced up. Their eyes met briefly before she looked away, pretending interest in the nearby food tables. Her father, never one to miss an opportunity for socializing, soon wandered off to speak with other merchants from town. Lillian found herself alone, maintaining a careful distance from the main celebration while observing the interactions around her. This was why such gatherings made her uncomfortable: the expectation of easy familiarity, the pressure to engage in meaningless conversation, the subtle matchmaking attempts that inevitably occurred when single young women were present. Not much for crowds. She turned to find Isaac beside her, 2 plates of food in his hands. He offered one to her. "Thank you," she said, accepting the plate, "and no, not particularly." "Me neither, if I'm honest," he admitted, surprising her. "Back in Wyoming, they used to call me the Ghost because I'd slip away from these gatherings as soon as politeness allowed." His confession drew a genuine smile from her. "Yet here you are, in the thick of it." "Part of the job," he said with a shrug. "A foreman can't hide in the shadows. Besides, some company is worth the discomfort." The directness of his gaze left no doubt about his meaning. Before she could respond, Mrs. Carson approached, practically beaming with approval at finding them together. "Isaac, you've met our lovely Miss Wells, I see. Isn't she a picture? And single, too. Can you believe no man has managed to claim such a beauty?" Lillian felt heat rise in her cheeks. "Mrs. Carson, please." "Oh, don't be modest, dear. A young woman like you should be surrounded by suitors." "But they say you turn them all away, breaking hearts left and right. This one," she added to Isaac with a conspiratorial wink. "I simply prioritize the trading post," Lillian explained stiffly. "Romance is a luxury frontier life rarely accommodates." Mrs. Carson's eyes widened in dismay. "Nonsense, the frontier is precisely why we need love, my dear. What else makes the hardships bearable?" She patted Isaac's arm. "Perhaps you can talk some sense into her. Such a waste, all that beauty and intelligence dedicated only to commerce." As the older woman bustled away, Lillian stared after her in mortification. "I apologize for that, Mrs. Carson is notorious for her matchmaking efforts." Isaac seemed more amused than embarrassed. "No apology needed, though I do find myself curious, is it true what she said about turning suitors away?" "That's rather personal, Mr. Everett." "Isaac," he corrected gently, "and you're right, it is. I withdraw the question." They ate in silence for a moment before he spoke again. "For what it's worth, I understand choosing solitude. After my parents died of cholera when I was 16, I spent years keeping to myself. Seemed safer that way." The unexpected disclosure caught her off guard. "I'm sorry about your parents." He nodded acknowledgement. "Life out here teaches harsh lessons early. But eventually, I realized isolation was its own kind of danger." Before she could ask what he meant, the musicians struck up a livelier tune, and several couples moved to the dance floor. Mr. Carson clapped his hands for attention. "Time for the Virginia reel, folks. Everyone find a partner. No wallflowers allowed at a Carson gathering." Lillian tensed, preparing her refusal, but Isaac spoke first. "Would you care to dance, Miss Wells? I promise not to tread on your toes too badly." She hesitated, torn between her instinct to decline and the earnest invitation in his eyes. Something about his earlier disclosure had shifted something in her perception of him. "I should warn you, I haven't danced in years." "What a coincidence, neither have I. We can relearn together." Against her better judgment, she placed her hand in his outstretched palm. "Very well, but don't say I didn't warn you." His fingers closed gently around hers as he led her to the line of dancers forming on the packed earth. The music quickened and they were swept into the pattern of the dance, forward and back, turning under joined hands, weaving between other couples. Despite his claimed rustiness, Isaac moved with natural grace, guiding her through the steps with light pressure on her hand or waist. To her surprise, Lillian found herself enjoying the dance. The rhythm, the movement, the structured interaction, it all felt safer than conversation, with its unpredictable turns. When they finally stopped, breathless and laughing, she realized it was the first time she had truly laughed in public since before James Colton's betrayal 3 years earlier. The thought sobered her immediately. She was letting her guard down, something she had promised herself she wouldn't do. "Thank you for the dance," she said formally, withdrawing her hand from his. "If you'll excuse me, I should find my father." Confusion flickered across Isaac's features. "Of course, but perhaps later." "I don't think so, Mr. Everett." She stepped back, rebuilding the walls that had momentarily lowered. "Enjoy the rest of the gathering." She walked away, chiding herself for the momentary weakness. This was exactly how it began with James: dancing, laughter, a sense of connection that proved entirely false when he absconded with not only her heart but also a significant portion of the trading post's cash reserves. She would not make the same mistake again. For the remainder of the afternoon, she kept her distance from Isaac, though she felt his gaze following her more than once. As evening approached and the gathering began to thin, her father finally announced it was time to depart. "We have a bit of a ride ahead," he explained to their hosts. "Best start before full dark." As they prepared to leave, Isaac appeared at their wagon. "I'll ride part way with you," he offered. "The trail can be treacherous after sunset." "That's not necessary," Lillian began, but her father interrupted. "Most appreciated young man. These old eyes don't see as well as they used to." The first miles passed in relative silence, broken only by her father's occasional observations about the land or weather. As they approached the forest section where the trail narrowed, Thomas Wells spoke up. "Actually, I believe I left my pipe at the Carson place. Isaac, would you mind terribly riding back to look for it while I continue with Lillian? We know this part of the trail well enough." Lillian shot her father a suspicious look. She had seen him tuck his pipe into his coat pocket before they left. Isaac seemed equally dubious but agreed politely. "Of course, sir. I'll catch up with you after I find it." As soon as he was out of earshot, Lillian confronted her father. "Your pipe is in your pocket. I saw you put it there." Thomas Wells smiled innocently. "Is it my mistake? Old age, you know." "What are you doing, Pa?" His expression grew serious. "Giving you a chance to see what's right in front of you. That young man has shown nothing but respect and kindness. Yet you treat him like he's about to rob us blind." "You don't know him," she protested. "And neither do you because you won't allow yourself to. Not everyone is James Colton, Lillian." She fell silent, unable to argue with the truth of his words, yet unwilling to acknowledge it. They continued along the trail as twilight deepened around them, the tension between them palpable. Suddenly, their horse shied violently, nearly overturning the wagon. Lillian grabbed for the reins as her father struggled to maintain his seat. "Whoa, easy," Thomas called, but the horse reared again, clearly spooked by something on the trail ahead. In the fading light, Lillian saw the cause: a mountain lion crouched at the edge of the path, its tawny form nearly invisible against the fallen leaves. The predator's eyes reflected the last of the sunset as it considered the horse and wagon. "Stay absolutely still," her father whispered. "It might move on." But the horse was too frightened to stand quietly. It stamped and tossed its head, threatening to bolt at any moment. The mountain lion shifted its weight, muscles tensing beneath its hide. A shot cracked through the forest, startling both humans and animals. The mountain lion snarled and retreated into the underbrush as Isaac rode into view, rifle still raised. "Are you both all right?" he called, scanning the trees for any sign the predator might return. "Thanks to you," Thomas answered shakily. "Thought we were in for real trouble there." Isaac dismounted, moving to calm their horse with practiced hands. "They rarely attack humans, but a spooked horse can do plenty of damage on its own." He looked to Lillian. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head, momentarily speechless. The danger had unfolded so quickly she had barely processed it before Isaac appeared, almost as if he had known they would need him. "You didn't really go back for the pipe," she said, understanding dawning. A slight smile touched his lips. No, I circled back through the woods, good thing too. Indeed, her father agreed with significantly more enthusiasm than the situation warranted. A fortunate coincidence. The rest of the journey passed without incident, Isaac riding alongside their wagon until the lights of Silver Creek appeared through the trees. As they reached the trading post, Thomas Wells insisted once more on expressing his gratitude. "We're in your debt again, son. First the storm, now this. Beginning to seem like you have a knack for being in the right place when my daughter needs help." "Just fortunate timing," Isaac demurred, though his gaze lingered on Lillian. "I should get back to the ranch. Mr. Carson will wonder what's keeping me." "Nonsense, it's too dark for safe travel now, and you'd have to pass right back through lion territory. We have a spare room, you'll stay the night and head back at first light." Lillian began to object. "I won't hear arguments," her father said firmly. "It's the least we can offer. Besides, the room's already made up from when the dry goods salesman stayed last week." Recognizing the futility of protest, Lillian helped prepare a simple supper while her father showed Isaac to the spare room. Throughout the meal, she remained largely silent, acutely aware of Isaac's presence across the table. Twice she caught him watching her with an expression of gentle curiosity that made her heart beat faster than it had during their encounter with the mountain lion. After they ate, her father announced he was retiring early, complaining of fatigue from the day's excitement. His transparent attempt to leave them alone might have been comical if it weren't so mortifying. "I should turn in as well," Lillian said, rising quickly. "Actually," Isaac ventured, "I was hoping we might talk for a few minutes, if you're willing." She hesitated, caught between the safety of retreat and a growing, uncomfortable awareness that her defenses against this particular man were already compromised. "Very well, but briefly, it's been a long day." They moved to the small sitting area adjacent to the trading post's main room. Through the windows, Lillian could see Silver Creek settling into night, lanterns extinguished one by one as its residents sought their beds. The trading post itself was quiet save for the ticking of the clock and the occasional pop from the banked fire. "What did you wish to discuss, Mr. Everett?" "Isaac," he corrected gently. "And I wanted to ask you something that's been on my mind since the gathering today." She tensed, expecting some declaration or invitation she would have to decline. "Yes. Mrs. Carson mentioned that you've turned away suitors. She seemed to think it unusual, but I recognized something in your response, something familiar." He paused, watching her carefully. "You said romance is a luxury frontier life rarely accommodates. But that's not the whole truth, is it?" The directness of his perception startled her. "I don't see how my personal views are any of your concern." "They're not," he acknowledged. "And yet, I can't help wondering why someone clearly capable of feeling deeply would choose isolation so deliberately." "You presume to know me based on a few brief encounters," she said stiffly. "No," he shook his head. "I recognize the walls you've built because I lived behind similar ones for years. The question is, what are you protecting yourself from?" The conversation had ventured into dangerous territory. Lillian stood, intending to end it. "It's late, Mr. Everett, I should." "Someone hurt you," he said quietly, "badly enough that you decided all connections carry the same risk." She froze, his words striking too close to truth. "You don't know what you're talking about." "Don't I?" His blue eyes held her steadily. "I told you my parents died when I was 16. What I didn't mention was that afterward, I was taken in by my father's business partner. A man I trusted completely until I discovered he had systematically stolen my inheritance while pretending to manage it for me. By the time I was 20, there was nothing left." The parallels to her own experience with James Colton were too precise to be coincidental. "My father told you about James," she accused. "No," Isaac replied, seeming genuinely surprised. "No one has told me anything, but I understand the look in your eyes when you pull away. I wore it myself for years." Lillian sank back into her chair, suddenly exhausted by the weight of her own defenses. 3 years ago, a man named James Colton arrived in Silver Creek. He was charming, educated, supposedly investing in mining operations throughout the territory. She hesitated, the admission difficult even now. "We became close. I believed we would marry." Instead, he disappeared with $300 from our safe, money we had set aside for expanding the trading post. "I'm sorry," Isaac said softly. "It wasn't just the money," she continued, the words flowing now that the dam had broken. "It was the humiliation of being so thoroughly deceived, of believing someone saw value in me beyond my usefulness or appearance, only to discover I was merely a means to an end. And since then, you've made sure no one could use you that way again." She nodded, unable to meet his gaze. "The frontier is unforgiving of such weakness." "Is it weakness to hope for connection, or is it human nature?" He leaned forward, his expression earnest. "The real frontier danger isn't in trusting Lillian. It's in forgetting why we struggle to survive in the first place. What's the point of all this?" He gestured to encompass the trading post and beyond, if not to build something meaningful with others. His words resonated uncomfortably with thoughts she had suppressed for years. And what if those others betray that meaning? "Some will," he acknowledged, "but not all. The trick is learning to tell the difference." "And you believe you can?" A small smile touched his lips. "I'm still learning. But I know enough to recognize when someone is worth the risk of being wrong." The implication hung between them, clear yet unspoken. Lillian found herself at a crossroads she had deliberately avoided for 3 years, the choice to remain safely isolated or to acknowledge the possibility that not all connections led to pain. "It's late," she said finally. "We should both rest." If he was disappointed by her retreat, he didn't show it. "Of course, thank you for your honesty, Lillian. It can't have been easy to share that." As she rose to leave, she surprised herself by asking, "Will you be returning to Silver Creek? After you go back to the Carson Ranch, I mean." "Yes," he answered without hesitation. "I find I have reason to." Sleep eluded Lillian that night. She replayed their conversation repeatedly, examining Isaac's words from every angle, searching for hidden motives or manipulation. But all she found was a straightforward honesty that both frightened and attracted her. He had recognized her walls because he had built similar ones himself, yet somehow he had found the courage to lower them. In the morning, Isaac departed with first light, accepting a package of provisions from Thomas Wells and exchanging a few quiet words with Lillian on the porch. "Thank you for your hospitality," he said formally, aware of her father's presence nearby, then more softly, "and for your trust." She nodded, uncertain how to respond to the genuine warmth in his gaze. "Safe travels, Isaac." As he mounted and rode away, her father joined her on the porch. Remarkable young man. "Yes," she agreed before she could stop herself. Thomas Wells smiled knowingly but said nothing more. The following weeks brought an early onset of winter. Snow blanketed the mountains surrounding Silver Creek, and business at the trading post slowed as travel became more difficult. Lillian told herself she wasn't watching for a particular black Stetson among their customers, just as she told herself the disappointment she felt when Isaac didn't appear was merely concern for his welfare in the harsh weather. November turned to December, and with Christmas approaching, Silver Creek prepared for its annual holiday gathering. Despite the isolation of frontier life, or perhaps because of it, the town embraced the holiday with particular enthusiasm. The small church was decorated with pine boughs and ribbons, and everyone contributed what they could to a communal celebration. "We should attend the Christmas Eve service," Thomas Wells announced one evening as they closed the trading post. "We always do," Lillian replied, distracted by her inventory calculations. "Yes, but this year I thought we might invite someone to join us." She looked up sharply. "Who?" "I ran into Amos Carson in town yesterday. Mentioned that Isaac Everett would be attending the service alone, since the Carsons are visiting their daughter in Helena for the holiday." Lillian set down her pencil, suspicion dawning. "And you volunteered our company." "It seemed the Christian thing to do," her father replied innocently. "No one should be alone at Christmas." She sighed, recognizing the fruitlessness of argument. "Fine. But don't read more into it than simple hospitality." "Wouldn't dream of it," he assured her, though his smile suggested otherwise. Christmas Eve arrived with perfect seasonal weather, crisp, clear, and cold, with just enough new snow to freshen the earlier fall without impeding travel. Lillian dressed with particular care in her best winter ensemble, a burgundy wool dress with velvet trim and matching bonnet. She told herself it was respect for the holiday, not anticipation of seeing Isaac again after nearly a month. The church was already filled when they arrived, golden lamplight spilling from its windows onto the snow outside. As they entered, removing their outer garments in the vestibule, Lillian scanned the assembled townspeople. Her heart skipped when she spotted Isaac near the front, his tall frame unmistakable even from behind. As if sensing her presence, he turned. Their eyes met across the crowded room, and he smiled, a genuine expression that reached his eyes and sent an unexpected warmth through her despite the December chill. He made his way toward them, exchanging greetings with others as he passed. "Mr. Wells, Miss Wells," he said, reaching them, "Merry Christmas." "Isaac, my boy," Thomas Wells clapped him on the shoulder, "good to see you. Join us for the service, won't you?" They settled into a pew together, hymnals in hand. Throughout the service, the familiar carols, the reading of the Christmas story, the minister's message of hope and redemption, Lillian remained acutely aware of Isaac beside her. Their shoulders occasionally brushed as they stood and sat, each contact sending a jolt of awareness through her that had nothing to do with the spiritual atmosphere. After the service concluded, the congregation moved to the town hall for a community supper and celebration. Tables groaned under the weight of contributed dishes, and a small band played holiday tunes while children raced excitedly around the decorated room. "Quite a gathering," Isaac observed as they entered. "The Carson Ranch celebration was impressive, but this puts it to shame." "Silver Creek takes Christmas seriously," Thomas explained. "For many, it's the only time all year they can set aside worries and simply enjoy company." As her father moved away to greet acquaintances, Lillian found herself alone with Isaac for the first time since his overnight stay at the trading post. "You look beautiful," he said simply. "That color suits you." "Thank you," she felt uncharacteristically shy under his direct gaze. "How have you been? The winter hasn't been too harsh at the ranch." "Nothing I couldn't handle," his eyes crinkled with amusement. "Though I did think about that spare room at your trading post during the worst blizzard." The mention of his previous stay reminded her of their late-night conversation, his perception of her defenses, his understanding of why she maintained them. In the weeks since, she had found herself revisiting his words repeatedly. The real frontier danger isn't in trusting, it's in forgetting why we struggle to survive in the first place. "I thought about our conversation," she admitted, surprising herself with her candor. "About trust and risk." Interest kindled in his expression, and I'm still not certain you're right, but I'm less certain that I am." He smiled, understanding the significance of this concession. "That's a start." They were interrupted by Mrs. Halloran, the boarding house proprietress, who insisted they both sample her special Christmas pudding. The remainder of the evening passed in a blur of socializing, feasting, and celebration. To Lillian's surprise, she found herself genuinely enjoying the gathering, her usual reserve softened by Isaac's presence beside her. He seemed to intuitively understand when to engage others on her behalf and when to create space for her to retreat from the stimulation of the crowded room. As the celebration wound down and families began departing with sleepy children, Thomas Wells approached them. "I've promised to help Reverend Mitchell deliver some food baskets to homesteads outside town," he announced. "Isaac, would you be kind enough to see Lillian home? I may be quite late." Lillian opened her mouth to protest the transparent matchmaking, but Isaac spoke first. "I'd be honored, sir, if Miss Wells has no objection." Put on the spot, she could only nod her agreement. Her father beamed approvingly before bustling away, leaving them alone once more. "Your father is not particularly subtle," Isaac observed with gentle humor as they collected their coats. "No," she agreed, embarrassment warming her cheeks, "he never has been." They stepped out into the crisp night air. The temperature had dropped further, and stars glittered with diamond brilliance in the clear sky. Their breath formed clouds of vapor as they walked the short distance to the trading post, their footsteps crunching in the fresh snow. "I've missed our conversations," Isaac said after a comfortable silence. "The hands at the ranch are good men, but not much for meaningful discussion." "What would you consider meaningful discussion?" she asked, genuinely curious. He considered the question thoughtfully. "Anything that reveals something true, not just facts or opinions, but understanding." He glanced at her, Like when you told me about James Colton, that was meaningful because it helped me understand you better. The directness of his response stirred both discomfort and appreciation in her. Few people in her experience spoke with such unguarded honesty. I'm not accustomed to such transparency, she admitted. I've noticed, he said, smiling, but you're more capable of it than you think. They had reached the trading post. Lillian unlocked the door, hesitating on the threshold. Propriety suggested she should thank him and bid him good night. Something else entirely suggested she invite him in. Would you like some coffee? She offered. It's a cold night for the ride back to the ranch. I would, he answered, his voice warm despite the December chill. Inside, she busied herself lighting lamps and stoking the banked fire while Isaac removed his coat and hat. The trading post's main room, usually bustling with customers during business hours, felt strangely intimate in the quiet of Christmas Eve. Make yourself comfortable, she said, gesturing to the sitting area. I'll prepare the coffee. In the small kitchen adjacent to their living quarters, Lillian assembled a tray with coffee and some of her father's favorite shortbread. Her hands trembled slightly as she worked, an unfamiliar nervousness overtaking her. She told herself it was simply the unusual circumstance of entertaining a man alone, but deep down, she knew it was more specific than that. It was Isaac himself, his perception, his patience, the genuine interest with which he regarded her. When she returned with the tray, she found him examining a photograph on the mantel, her mother, taken a year before the mountain fever claimed her. Your mother? He asked as she set down the tray. Yes, Sarah Wells. She died 6 years ago. You have her features, he observed, the same quality of attention in the eyes. The comment so specific, so observant, caught her off guard. You see that in a photograph. I see it in you, he corrected gently. The way you notice details others miss, like when you assembled my supplies that first day at the trading post, you saw what I needed before I asked. She poured the coffee, unsure how to respond to his perception. Sugar, please. They settled into chairs near the fire, the crackling flames and ticking clock the only sounds for several moments. Finally, Lillian gathered her courage to ask the question that had lingered since their last meaningful conversation. After what happened with your inheritance, being betrayed by someone you trusted, how did you learn to trust again? Isaac cradled his coffee cup, considering, slowly, painfully, with many mistakes along the way. He met her gaze directly. I spent years believing isolation was safety. It took losing someone important to realize it was actually a slow death. Someone important. A shadow crossed his features. A woman I might have married if I'd been brave enough to risk my heart again. By the time I recognized what I was throwing away, she had married someone else. The admission created a strange ache in Lillian's chest. I'm sorry. Don't be. It taught me the lesson I needed most. He set his cup down, leaning forward intently. Lillian, protecting yourself from pain also means protecting yourself from joy. It's a poor bargain in the end. His words struck her with unexpected force, crystallizing something she had sensed but not articulated. For 3 years, she had maintained her walls so effectively that nothing could hurt her, but nothing could reach her either. The trading post, her father, the routines of survival, these had become her entire world, constricting with each passing season. I don't know how to change, she confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. Even when I want to. Isaac's expression softened. You begin with small truths, things you've been afraid to say even to yourself. The firelight cast shifting shadows across his features as he waited, making no demands but offering a space for honesty she had denied herself for too long. In that moment, Lillian recognized the crossroads before her with perfect clarity. Continue on her isolated path or step into uncertain territory with this man who somehow saw through her defenses. I'm afraid, she said finally, the admission feeling both terrifying and liberating. Not just of being hurt again, but of discovering that I've wasted years hiding from life instead of living it. Fear is natural, he replied. Courage isn't the absence of fear, it's action despite it. Is that what you did? After you lost her? He nodded. I decided that next time fear wouldn't make my choices for me. His gaze held her steadily. Lillian, I've known since the day we met that there was something special about you, something worth pursuing despite any risk. But I can't pursue someone who isn't open to being caught. The directness of his statement sent a flush of heat through her that had nothing to do with the nearby fire. What are you asking? I'm asking if you could fall in love again. If you would allow yourself that possibility. The question hung between them, weighted with significance beyond the simple words. Lillian felt as though she stood on a precipice, the familiar territory of isolation behind her, an unknown landscape ahead. For 3 years she had answered such questions with automatic denial, but now, facing Isaac's honest gaze, she found herself unable to summon the practiced refusal. I don't know, she whispered, offering the only truth she possessed. I want to believe I could, but wanting isn't the same as doing. Instead of disappointment, understanding filled his expression. Why? The simple question caught her completely off guard. Why what? Why can't you fall in love? What specifically are you afraid would happen? In all the times men had expressed interest or her father had encouraged her to open her heart, no one had ever asked this fundamental question. They had offered platitudes, assurances, even arguments, but never sought to understand the core of her resistance. I'm afraid, she began slowly, finding words for feelings she had never fully articulated, that I would lose myself. That I would become so invested in someone else's happiness that I would ignore warning signs, make excuses, blind myself to truth as I did before. I'm afraid I don't trust my own judgment. Isaac considered her words carefully. That's a legitimate fear. Not being able to trust yourself is perhaps more frightening than not being able to trust others. His validation, so different from the dismissive reassurances she usually received, loosened something tight within her chest. Yes, exactly. May I tell you what I see when I look at you, Lillian? She nodded, suddenly breathless. I see someone who has grown stronger and wiser through pain, someone who observes carefully, who makes decisions thoughtfully. The woman you are now isn't the same one James Colton deceived. He leaned closer, his voice gentle but firm. You don't give yourself enough credit for how much you've learned. Tears pricked at Lillian's eyes, unexpected emotion welling up at his perception. You can't know that. I've watched you these past months, the way you manage the trading post, the way you assess strangers, the way you protected your heart from me despite clear attraction between us. These aren't the actions of someone with poor judgment. His confidence in her, so at odds with her own self-doubt, created a strange lightness in her chest, as if a burden she had carried for years might actually be set down. Thank you, she said softly, for seeing me, not just who I was or what happened to me, but who I am now. That's all I've wanted since the day we met. He reached across the space between them, his hand open in invitation. To see you, to know you, to discover if what I sensed from the beginning could grow into something meaningful. After a moment's hesitation, she placed her hand in his. His fingers closed gently around hers, warm and steady. I can't promise I won't be afraid, she warned, or that I won't retreat sometimes when that fear overwhelms me. I don't need promises, he replied, only honesty. And perhaps the chance to prove, day by day, that your trust isn't misplaced. Something shifted between them in that moment, a foundation laid upon which something new might be built. Not with grand declarations or passionate embraces, but with the simple recognition of two souls who had walked similar paths and understood each other's scars. I think, Lillian said carefully, that I would like to discover what might grow between us. His smile, warm, genuine, without a trace of triumph, confirmed the rightness of her decision. Then we'll discover it together, slowly, honestly, with eyes wide open. The clock on the mantel chimed midnight, marking the arrival of Christmas Day. Outside, snow began to fall again, soft flakes drifting past the windows in the golden lamplight. Merry Christmas, Lillian, Isaac said quietly, his hand still holding hers. Merry Christmas, Isaac. For the first time in years, the traditional greeting felt like more than empty words, it felt like possibility, like hope. When Thomas Wells returned an hour later, he found them still talking by the fire, hands occasionally touching, laughter sometimes breaking the quiet intimacy of their conversation. He observed them for a moment from the doorway, smiling at the change in his daughter's posture, in the animation of her expression as she spoke. Then he cleared his throat to announce his presence. "Reverend Mitchell sends his regards," he said, brushing snow from his coat. "And his leftover mince pies, which I was instructed to share." "Perfect timing, Pa," Lillian replied with a warmth that had been absent from her voice for too long. "We were just saying how hungry we'd become." As they shared the pies and Thomas regaled them with stories from his delivery rounds, Lillian caught Isaac watching her with an expression that made her heart race despite its gentleness. Not desire, though that was present too, but something rarer, appreciation. As if the simple fact of her existence, exactly as she was, brought him joy. Later, after Isaac had departed with promises to return the following day, Thomas Wells embraced his daughter tightly. "I haven't seen you smile like that in years," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "It suits you." "I'm not promising anything, Pa," she cautioned. "We're simply exploring possibilities." "That's all life ever is, my girl. A series of possibilities we either embrace or reject." He kissed her forehead. "I'm glad to see you embracing some again." The winter months that followed became a season of gradual thawing, not just of the frozen landscape as February gave way to March, but of Lillian's carefully maintained reserve. Isaac visited Silver Creek whenever weather and ranch duties permitted, sometimes staying only long enough for a meal and conversation, other times remaining overnight in the trading post's spare room when storms made travel dangerous. With each visit, Lillian found herself sharing more of her thoughts, her memories, her hopes for the trading post's future. In turn, Isaac revealed his own past, his childhood in St. Louis, his parents' decision to seek opportunity in Wyoming, his years of drifting after losing his inheritance, taking whatever ranch work would feed him while he rebuilt his life. "What made you come to Montana?" she asked one evening in late March as they sat on the trading post's porch, watching the sun set behind mountains still capped with snow. Truthfully. He smiled wryly. "I was running out of places to hide from myself." She understood immediately. "And you thought the most remote territory might be far enough." "Something like that." He reached for her hand, a gesture that had become familiar but never lost its significance. "I never expected to find a reason to stay." The warmth that bloomed in her chest at his words was becoming familiar too, a sensation of possibility, of future, that she had denied herself for too long. She leaned against his shoulder, allowing herself to enjoy the solid strength of him beside her. "I'm glad you did," she said softly. "Find a reason, I mean." His arms slipped around her waist, holding her close but without demand. In this, as in all things, he remained patient, allowing her to set the pace of their growing intimacy. "So am I," he murmured, pressing a gentle kiss to her temple. Spring arrived with its usual Montana contradiction of warm days and freezing nights, of wildflowers pushing through lingering snow patches. As the land reawakened, so too did Silver Creek, with increased traffic through the trading post as ranchers prepared for the season's work and travelers took advantage of improving conditions. In April, Isaac arrived with news that changed everything. "Amos Carson has offered me a permanent partnership in the ranch," he announced as they walked along Silver Creek's awakening banks. "A quarter share now with the possibility of more as he gets older. He has no sons and his daughter's husband has no interest in ranching." Lillian absorbed the implications instantly. "So you would stay?" "Permanently." "If I accept," he stopped walking, turning to face her directly, "but before I do, I need to know something." Her heart raced, sensing the weight of the moment. "What?" "These past months have been the happiest of my life, Lillian. I hope they've brought you happiness too." "They have," she admitted without hesitation. The truth of it was undeniable. Since Christmas Eve, when she had first allowed herself to consider the possibility of loving again, each day had seemed brighter, each conversation richer, each moment more fully lived than in all the empty years before. "Then I need to know if you can imagine a future where that happiness continues, where we build something lasting together." His blue eyes held her steadily. "I'm not asking for promises yet, just possibility." Lillian felt the familiar fear rise, the instinct to protect herself, to retreat behind well-established walls. But alongside it rose a newer, stronger feeling, the recognition of what she would lose by yielding to that fear. "I can imagine it," she said softly, "more clearly each day." The joy that transformed his features made her breath catch. He pulled her gently into his arms, embracing her with a tenderness that spoke more eloquently than words. "Then I'll accept Carson's offer," he murmured against her hair, "and we'll see what possibilities unfold." By early summer, those possibilities had crystallized into certainty. Isaac had moved permanently to the Carson Ranch, establishing himself as an integral part of its operations while making the ride to Silver Creek several times each week. The town had accepted him as Lillian's suitor with a mixture of surprise and approval. Surprise that the reserved trading post proprietress had finally opened her heart, approval of the man she had chosen to receive it. In June, he asked her to accompany him to a specific spot on Carson land, a ridge overlooking the valley, where wildflowers carpeted the ground and the snow-capped mountains provided a magnificent backdrop. "I discovered this place during my first week at the ranch," he explained as he helped her down from her horse. "I used to ride up here to think, to remember why I came west in the first place." "It's beautiful," Lillian agreed, taking in the sweeping vista. "I can see why it became special to you." Isaac took both her hands in his expression suddenly serious. "It became more special the day I realized I wanted to share it with you, that I wanted to share everything with you." The intention behind his words was unmistakable. Lillian felt her heart accelerate, a mixture of anticipation and lingering fear coursing through her. After months of gradual opening, of learning to trust both Isaac and herself, this moment represented the final threshold, the point of no return. "Lillian Wells," he continued, his voice steady despite the emotion evident in his eyes, "I have loved you since the day you swept that trading post porch and looked at me with such careful suspicion." A laugh escaped her, half joy and half nervousness. "Not the most romantic beginning." "But honest," he countered, squeezing her hands. "Like everything between us has been. I fell in love with your strength, your intelligence, your capacity for caring despite your determination not to. And I have thanked God every day for the chance to know you, to earn your trust, to watch you bloom again." Tears welled in Lillian's eyes as he knelt before her, still holding her hands. "I'm asking if you'll marry me. If you'll build a life with me that honors both our pasts without being defined by them. If you'll trust me with your heart as completely as I trust you with mine." For a breathless moment, she stood on the precipice of her final fear, the commitment that would make her truly vulnerable again. Then with perfect clarity she recognized that vulnerability was no longer something to dread. With Isaac, it had become a gateway to joy. "Yes," she said, her voice strong despite her tears. "Yes, I will marry you, Isaac Everett." He rose to his feet, drawing her into his arms. Their first kiss was gentle at first, then deepened with all the emotion of the journey that had brought them to this moment, the pain they had both survived, the walls they had dismantled together, the future they would build from the ruins of broken trust. When they finally broke apart, breathless and laughing, Isaac pressed his forehead to hers. "I was prepared for a much longer persuasion." "So was I," she admitted, "but I realized something important. When you asked me at Christmas if I could fall in love again, I truly didn't know, but standing here now, I understand that I've already answered that question. I love you, Isaac. Not despite my fears, but alongside them." "That's all I ever hoped for," he said softly, "not fearlessness but courage." They were married in Silver Creek's small church on a perfect August day, with Thomas Wells proudly escorting his daughter down the aisle and the entire town bearing witness to the union. Lillian wore her mother's wedding dress, carefully altered to fit her slimmer frame, and carried wildflowers gathered from the ridge where Isaac had proposed. The celebration afterward spilled from the town hall into the main street, with tables of food, music, and dancing that continued long after sunset. As Lillian and Isaac moved among their well-wishers, she caught her father watching them with undisguised satisfaction. "You were right," she told him when they had a moment alone. "Not everyone is James Colton." "I knew you'd figure it out eventually," he replied, his eyes twinkling. "You always were smarter than your old father." "Not smarter," she corrected, embracing him tightly. "Just more stubborn." "Well, thank God for Isaac Everett," Thomas said, glancing toward his new son-in-law, who was being congratulated by Amos Carson nearby. "He's the only man I've ever met more stubborn than you." Lillian laughed, recognizing the truth in her father's assessment. Isaac's patience, his willingness to understand rather than dismiss her fears, his steady presence through her gradual opening, these had been the keys that unlocked the heart she had barricaded so thoroughly. Later that night, as they prepared to depart for the small cabin Isaac had built on his portion of the Carson property, he drew her aside for a private moment away from the celebration. "Happy?" he asked simply, his hands warm on her waist. "More than I believed possible," she answered truthfully. "I spent so many years convinced that the only safe path was isolation. I never imagined that the right person could make vulnerability feel like strength." "That's what love does when it's real," he said, brushing a loose strand of honey-blonde hair from her face. "It doesn't erase our wounds or make us forget our scars. It just gives them meaning, makes them part of a larger story that continues beyond the pain." As the summer night wrapped around them, stars appearing one by one in the vast Montana sky, Lillian recognized the distance she had traveled, from the woman who had swept the trading post porch with suspicion in her heart to the bride who now stood embraced by a future she had once feared to imagine. "Thank you," she whispered against Isaac's shoulder. "For what?" "For asking why, for seeing past my walls to the question no one else thought to ask." He smiled, understanding perfectly. Some treasures are worth digging for. And as they rode away from Silver Creek toward their new home, lanterns lighting their path through the summer darkness, Lillian felt the last of her fear dissolve into certainty. The frontier remained what it had always been: challenging, sometimes dangerous, demanding courage from those who sought to build lives within its vastness. But she no longer faced it alone, walled off from both pain and joy. She had found her answer to the question Isaac had asked that Christmas Eve. Yes, she could fall in love again. And in doing so, she had discovered that love itself was the answer to the frontier's greatest challenge, not merely survival, but truly living in the face of an uncertain world.